Captain Midnight.
This video is brought to you by Brilliant. This review will contain spoilers. So, Disney has a question for you. To paraphrase The Dark Knight, you want to know how he got these scars? And they're really hoping the answer is yes. Mufasa the Lion King, a prequel to the 2019 mega-hit remake, hit theaters recently, and I was a little more interested in seeing it than many of the other Disney live-action, and I'm using scare quotes there, adaptations, because it isn't a remake. This is a new, original tale. It's from the director of Moonlight and If Beale Street Could Talk. There's also new music from Lin-Manuel Miranda. I'm not saying I had high expectations, like I really didn't like the 2019 version, but on paper, this at least looked more interesting. It also represents something for Disney that addresses a problem I was talking about all the way back in June of 2023. What happens when they run out of remakes but are still addicted to milking their IPs? Mufasa attempts to answer that question and paints a possible picture for where these movies could go after the initial wave of their animated classics have already been remade. Does it work? And is this a sustainable model for Disney in the future? Well, let's talk about it. First, I want to say this will be my last video of the year. I'm actually hitting the road to spend Christmas with my family like right after I record this audio, so I will see you all in 2025. If you still haven't subscribed yet, you could still help the channel hit that 700k subscriber goal. We are so close now. It would definitely be appreciated, but either way, thanks for watching.
That's why, with the Lion King pack from Sega, the Lion King game comes with a Genesis or Game Gear.
Lion King soundtrack CD free with every Lion King pack.
Like many, if not most of you, I grew up on The Lion King. Every song, every joke, every wonderfully animated scene expertly crafted to inspire wonder in a 6-year-old. I have a lot of love for all of it. Lion King and Toy Story, I think, were the first actual movies I had on VHS, so it would be very easy for me to get really precious about that movie here and talk about moments that I felt betrayed that material. And honestly, I'll probably still do that a little bit, but one thing I kept having to keep in mind is that this movie is not a prequel to the Lion King of my childhood, but a prequel to the 2019 movie, which I just really did not like. And that's reason enough that I even have a video on it from that time. I found that film to be ugly, drab, and completely bereft of the kind of wonder I just mentioned. They butchered both the majestic remember who you are scene and the lighthearted fun stuff, like I Just Can't Wait to Be King, with the film's plodding commitment to visual realism and the inexpressive animals that came with it. So with that bit of context, I think Mufasa comes off a bit better. The characters are a bit more expressive, the action scenes have a bit more energy and verve to them, and there's the added benefit of not having an animated masterpiece to hold a one-to-one comparison against. If I had to pick between Lion King 2019 and this, I'm taking Mufasa every time, but does that mean it's good? Sadly, not really. Ultimately, this movie fails on the same level that most prequels fail. It never truly justifies existing in the first place. The relationship between Mufasa and Scar, really the only potentially interesting thread for a prequel that the first film provides, starts well but doesn't land on its feet here, with Scar's turn towards betraying his adopted brother feeling very sudden and rushed. I'll get back to that, but first I want to address an aspect of the film that I personally found way more annoying. See, this movie feels scared. It's terrified that if it doesn't bring back the crowd-pleasing duo of Timon and Pumbaa and create a concrete connection to the last film, that people won't be interested. So instead of just telling its story, it elects to use a framing device that's somewhat similar to the one seen in Lion King 1.5, with the pair commenting on the story as it unfolds, almost directly to the audience. Alongside Kiara, Nala and Simba's daughter, introduced in 1998's The Lion King 2, and voiced here by Nala voice actor Beyoncé's actual daughter. I really did not like these sections. In theory, I think it works as like a pair of bookends. At the end of the film, Kiara is introduced to her new baby brother after she just spent the film learning a lesson about family, but Billy Eichner and Seth Rogen's take on the mercat and the warthog are just nails on a chalkboard. The film keeps cutting back to them, and there's kind of a flailing stand-up comedian quality to the whole thing, where it seems like they just needed to fill time for some reason. And this includes a lot of like fourth wall breaking jokes about the stage play or how beloved Hakuna Matata is, that really rob the scenes of the childhood earnestness that Kiara's story is trying to get across. Everyone loves Timon and Pumbaa, this movie knows that, but I think it vastly overestimates how much we like these versions of Timon and Pumbaa, because man does this movie bet big on you not being able to get enough of these two. It was also funny to hear Donald Glover return as Simba for a couple scenes. I like Glover, I think he's a really talented guy, but he's not great in the last movie, and he feels like he's reading off a takeout menu here. Ultimately, these scenes just don't feel super necessary, beyond creating some connective tissue to the first movie. I will say it is kind of interesting how much of an effort they make to bring to mind the animated Lion King sequels, with the daughter's name being an actual connection. It probably says something pretty damning about today's film landscape that these kind of sequels were once understood to be pretty modest straight-to-video affairs, and now they're massively budgeted movies being directed by a Best Picture winner who has gone on record saying directing it wasn't for me before it even comes out. Geez, that's kind of depressing. Anyway, we eventually do get to the Mufasa part of this Mufasa movie. And, it's pretty by the numbers stuff. I do think it's funny that the movie presents us with this idea that Mufasa was also separated from his mom and dad at a very young age, only to show back up as an adult. Apparently, Simba's family just has this legacy of extremely great parents whose young kids get separated from them for the majority of their adolescence. He's adopted by young Scar's family, and Scar is named Taka, for now, and raised by Taka's caring mother, while Taka himself is stuck with his mean, aggressive dad, who rules their pride. Now, I don't think any of this squares particularly well with the original Lion King. When Mufasa is explaining the circle of life to Simba and telling him how everything the light touches will be his domain, it has all the James Earl Jones weightiness of a speech that he was told by his father, something handed down from generation to generation of Lion Kings. Not something that's basically being done for the first time. But that's just my interpretation, and they clearly wanted Mufasa to be a more scrappy underdog than a prince here. Instead, the prince figure is Taka, who is expected to take over once his useless father steps down, I guess. But before that can happen, Mads Mikkelsen as Kyros and his band of white lions launch an ambush on Taka's pride. Now, I've read some criticism of this because white lions are actually extremely rare in nature, and whether that's the case or not, I honestly don't care because it at least allowed us to be able to tell these way too realistic looking creations apart a lot easier. Mufasa took out the villain's son, and soon Mads Mikkelsen and the gang are hellbent on revenge. Kyros as a villain is perfectly serviceable, I'm sure kids will find him very scary, and Mikkelsen turns in his usual intimidating villain act that I'm pretty sure he could do in his sleep at this point. What I'm more interested in though is how he plays into Taka's story. I'll come back to that in a second, because I should probably get to the music. I do not envy Miranda here. The Lion King has one of the best soundtracks of Disney's entire catalog. It seems like an impossible act to follow. Does he come close? I mean, not really, but I didn't hate these songs either. They're catchy and pleasant enough. I think he handles some of the lighter songs well, but anything that's supposed to be a little more dramatic, it doesn't feel like a great fit. And this live-action Lion King will never be able to hold a candle to how expressive and colorful the original is during those musical segments. I've heard that some people absolutely hated these songs, and I don't really agree. I think Miranda has an ear for a catchy chorus, and I enjoyed them more than the ones in Moana 2. What's a bigger issue for me is Scar's journey to becoming the creep he eventually is. The movie does a very effective job of setting up Mufasa and Scar's childhood and young adult friendship. There's a real camaraderie there, which I thought the actors were able to get across even within this very limited style. I think this friendship is what the film creates most effectively, building a relationship between these two very different young lions that does feel natural and believable. Eventually though, we get to the turn, where Taka has a crush on Nala and clumsily pursues her even as it's clear that she's interested in Mufasa. Taka gets bent out of shape about it, feels betrayed, and then immediately goes and makes a deal with the lions who slaughtered his father. I was pretty let down by this transformation into the Disney villain we all know, because in a movie that had plenty of stuff they could have cut, like most of those Timon and Pumbaa scenes, this is the element that needed more time. I think this situation could work well as the thing that initially drives a wedge between them, but as lifelong friends, this super harsh turn from Taka, without a single conversation with Mufasa, just felt very jarring and sudden. It seemed like a plot turn that felt dictated by the needs of being a prequel, rather than naturally arising from the choices of the characters. And from there, things go exactly as you'd expect. They make it to the setting of the first film. We even get to see why Pride Rock looks like that in a particularly strained prequel moment. And finally, Taka does one last noble thing, saving Mufasa and getting his scar in the process. Which leads to a very awkward scene where they have to explain why everyone is gonna call him Scar from now on. In the end, I found this a lot easier to sit through than, say, the Mulan remake or the Pinocchio remake. But does this feel like a way forward for these live action remakes? Absolutely not. This feels much closer to an episode of a Lion King TV show or a direct-to-video sequel than the majestic follow-up to a major movie. It looks expensive, and surely it was, but narratively, there's just not much meat on the bone here. I don't hate Mufasa, the Lion King, but it is still the exact kind of movie that I think Disney needs to move on from. Well, that's it. My last video of 2024. Now, I do have some big changes in mind for next year. If you do too, one thing I'd like to recommend is Brilliant.org. Using it, you're learning from experts from MIT, Caltech, Duke, Microsoft, Google, and more. And you're doing it all at your pace and on your schedule, which I know is incredibly important for those who are trying to continue to learn, but have a job or other obligations that they have to work around. I know what that's like, and it isn't always easy. That's a huge part of why I think Brilliant.org is so important. It's a highly interactive way to tackle math, science, and computer science concepts. They've recently really expanded their focus on data science, creating a course that is perfect for learners of all levels, with new content on data visualization, algorithms, regression models, and more. Plus, you can work with real datasets from top brands like Airbnb, Spotify, and Starbucks to gain practical insights. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/midnight or scan the QR code on screen. And you can always click that link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. That's brilliant.org/midnight.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes too.